Good morning. I'm Pat McDaniel and I'm here at the Red Pine Quilt Shop in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and I'm going to show you how to make a little pincushion gnome. It's a fun gift if you belong to a quilt guild. Last year I made one for everybody in the guild, so they don't take much time at all and not much material. One thing you need to have is it starts with a 5-inch square of a Christmas fabric or whatever fabric you want to make your gnome out of, and you need a 2 by 5.5 inch piece of fake fur. When you're cutting your fake fur, it's nice to have a real sharp little scissor and to go slide it just under the backing of the fabric and snip. That way you don't have all the long fuzzy hair in your way when you go to put it together. I use a small toothbrush, new one of course, and when I want to get the fur out of my way, I just kind of comb it a little bit, because you're going to go down one side and then come back on the other. When you get ready to pin your fur on the diagonal, you want it so that you have approximately 3/4 of an inch here from the corner, and the same on the other end. So it's 3/4 of an inch away. I put 3 pins in down the middle, and again this is where you can use the toothbrush to kind of brush it away. When you're doing this, you turn it onto the back side, and you can see that little snip of fur that hangs out there on the end. I cut that off before I start to sew it. So just snip it off so it's out of your way. Get my pins out of my way here. So that's the second step. For the third step, you're going to take it to your sewing machine and zigzag around the fur. See where I've trimmed the corners here so they aren't sticking out over the edge? So just zigzag all the way around. When you get down to this end, just brush it out of the way. You can do this with your fingers too, but I found a toothbrush works pretty good. And then zigzag back up this side. That's the third step. For the fourth step, you're going to take this and you're going to fold it diagonally, like so. So the fur is all down here in the bottom. And when you pin this or clip it, you want to make sure as much of that fur sticks inside as you can. So just poke it in with your finger. Okay? When you sew, you're going to start at one edge. I stitch off the corner and then turn it around and put it back under my machine and stitch again. When you get to the part that you want to leave open, I sew out to the edge of the fabric and back stitch to the seam line. And then go down to the other end of it, sew in and back and in, and then off the corner. This gives it a nice crisp fold when you go to hand stitch it shut. So the next step, after you've stitched around that, is you need to trim your corners. So down here you're going to cut this off. You're going to cut off up here and the other corner. And then you're going to turn it through this opening that you left. You need to leave at least 1.5 inches, more if you're not comfortable turning, because it's not real easy to turn all of this. You stick your finger in there and you poke it out. And Joy has this wonderful tool called, I think it's a point turner or something, that would go into there very nicely. The reason for leaving the 3/4 inch at the beginning is so you have these tabs sticking out of the fur. You want to have those to make the next step easier. So the next step after you've turned it is, I like to take wool batting, just scraps, because I have it. And if you separate this into many layers, it'll stuff nicely. If you try and just stuff it as squares or whatever, it won't go in there very well. But the wool batting tears very easily into layers, and it'll stuff into the pincushion nicely. It's good for your pins. If you don't have that, it'll take about that much polyfill, a good softball size, to fill him. And you can use that also, it's fine. So after it's opened, I do what's called a ladder stitch to close it. And the first thing I do is I take some of this thread conditioner and run my thread through it. Just stick it on like so and pull the thread so that it doesn't tangle as much. And then when you do a ladder stitch, you can close this opening any way you want, but I happen to like a ladder stitch. I'm trying to get my knot to the end here. If you start at the fur end, you're always going to wind the fur around your needle. So start sewing it closed from the tip of the hat or the tip of the gnome. And then this won't get in your way as much. For a ladder stitch, you go where the seam line would be. Take a small stitch on one side. Back over to the other side so it looks like a ladder. And then back again. And you can see like the rungs of the ladder there. So that when you get all the way or as far as you want to go, when you pull that, it closes it very nicely. And it almost looks like it's machine sewn. So you sew that. After you've done your ladder stitch and you have it all together, it'll look something like this. With the fur here, and you can comb it now or later, it doesn't really matter. But you're going to take a long thread and start at one of your tips of fabric that are sticking out and connect it to the other tip of fabric. And you're going to have to, oh, I got it stuck there in the fur. Anyway, so you push it down in the center and bring those two tips together and hold them tightly. And do 3 or 4 stitches across both of them. They won't show later, so it doesn't really matter. But do about 3 or 4 stitches to hold it together nice and tight. And we're almost done. So after you've got that together and knotted, then it'll look like this. And you need to add the pom-pom on the top. I'd use a glue gun. And the nose in the middle. So that's it, a Santa Claus gnome, a Christmas gnome. If you use spring fabrics, it'll be a flower child gnome, anything like that. And they're fun. They work for pin cushions as long as you don't stick the pin in too tight. So that's what they look like when they're done. If you push the pin in too far, it'll poke you. Thanks for watching.